Hello, everyone, and welcome, and good morning. In California, we're having a rainy day. I don't know about you, David. In Portland, what's cooking over there?
It's winter, it's gray, and it's probably raining. We'll go with that.
Oh, probably raining. Okay, my name is Pamela Schure, and I'm the Director of Products and Services at 280 Group, and I'm joined here by David Nash. And we're very excited to present our first webinar of 2020, and it's kicking off our product leadership webinar series, but we thought we'd have a look both back and forward to some of the trends. What I want to talk about is, well, actually, in a few minutes, David is going to be leading you through all this information about what you should be looking out for and what you should have looked out for last year, and making sure that you can build great products in 2020. But let's go over a few housekeeping items. After this webinar, you can continue to stay engaged with the product management community. As product leaders, you have a lot of challenges that you face, so go ahead and get connected with some of our folks here. I'm just going to click something and send you a link of how to join our LinkedIn group and make sure that you keep informed as to the latest and greatest new content that we have. And we love interacting with you. So during this webinar, we encourage you to ask questions and give feedback. I've got my chat window open, so I'll be keeping track of everything while David is going to be leading you through most of this. And we'll make sure that at the end we have a great Q&A. So all bets are off. You can ask whatever you like. If you stick to the content, that's helpful for us, but we're happy to do whatever. All right, so now let's see if I can get this thing going here. David, for some reason, I'm not being able to control it. Can you click on to the next slide, please? All right, so that's us. Go ahead and keep going here. All right, that's the leadership group. Okay, and right. So there we go. That's for the chat window. Keep going. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the 280 group here. So at 280 Group, our mission is to empower product managers, go ahead and flip forward here there, and to do great product management and become product leaders. And we do that with our methodology and framework. This is the optimal product process. And we developed this in conjunction with a lot of very experienced product managers. And guess what? It seems to work. It was interesting. We were talking with a customer yesterday who said, yes, I implemented it, and I did it on time, in budget, and got great reviews. Hey, we should all be so lucky. And just to kick off your 2020 in fine style here, we've actually got a code here. My goodness, this is kind of like when you get to join the gym at the beginning of the year, isn't it, David? We've got a code for becoming the new you as a product manager. So new you 2020, it'll give you a couple $100 off the in-person training. So join us wherever we are. I think, David, you're going to New York, right? I think I'm
know it.
To London this year. So go ahead and join us because we have a lot to talk about. So right now, we're really excited to bring you the first of our webinars, and we're going to talk about in the Product Management Leader Series. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually turn this over to David at this moment, and he is going to talk you through what's going on. I'm going to turn off our webcam, right, so you can just focus on what's going on the screen. Oh, and whoa, hold on. I forgot to tell you about David. So I've done product management for 25 plus years. And David, how long have you been doing this? Or is this embarrassing to admit?
Let's go with that.
Okay, a long time. And the interesting thing
it's been a couple of years.
He's worked in the hardware side, he's worked in the software side, and he comes to us with just a wealth of experience on all these trends because he's lived on the bleeding edge for many years. So let's turn it over to David and hear what he has to say.
All right, thanks, Pam, and good morning and afternoon to everybody. Here in sunny Portland, Oregon, yeah, kind of not so much. We're going to get rolling here. So as Pam said, this is actually the next in a series of webinars we're doing this year. And the series really has two goals. They're really intended to help us grow as product management practitioners and leaders. And if you're leading a team, you know, hopefully you can build out some new muscle and new skills on your product management or product marketing team. Here's a quick look on the bottom half of the slide on some of the themes we'll carry through. And, the goal, as Pam said a couple of minutes ago, using the optimal product process and other practices, is to just get better at the things we do every day. We have some 500 plus people who have signed up for the webinar this morning with us, and gosh, about almost 50% of them are some combination of product owner, product manager, or leader in product management, and that's pretty representative. We see the same kind of makeup in a lot of our classes, in a lot of the product camps that we sponsor around the country, so good diverse audience. We're hoping for some good interaction. So the next thing I'd like to do is, if you were with us a year ago, almost to the day, we asked you, what's going to be important in 2019? So let's see what happened there. The first thing is that we said, well, we have to maintain foundational skills. And foundational skills, they're not trends. They don't come and go seasonally. These are things like whole product. These are things like doing product market fit. These are things like, being agents of change and effectively managing change management. So they're not fashion items. They're still just as important last year, this year, and next year. The other things we spoke about last year were around customer journey mapping, really key. We hit this in our Agile product management and product owner class, and we spent a lot of time in this as an important technique. Jobs to be done, by the way, is hardly new. Anthony Ulwick wrote the book on this topic literally almost 15 years ago, but it's going through a renaissance today, and a lot of practitioners are rediscovering jobs to be done. Internal advocacy, again, it was important last year, very important moving ahead. Some hot trends we saw come out last year are kind of recapped here. A couple of key ones. Subscription services continued to explode. I mean, if you looked at things which you didn't think about a couple of years ago, like clothing as a service, look what happened with Stitch Fix and probably 15 other companies where now you can just subscribe to getting a box of clothes once a month. So subscription models, some of them, many of them being successful, many of them being tested all over the place. AI, machine learning really taking off. You're going to hear me reference a couple of commercial products. I'm not trying to sell you a Tesla or sell you anything, but if you're driving a Tesla out there today, you're seeing machine learning and artificial intelligence just exploding with real practical applications. Digital touchpoints, will hit on those as well. Still happened. This was not really hard to predict because we read voraciously about tech, but a lot of the forecasts a year ago are certainly coming true and will continue to be true for the year ahead. So moving forward to the meat and potatoes of today's program, here's a couple of three things we want to hit. First, in product management skills and methodologies, and the second part of the webinar will be focused on technology and innovation trends. First off, product operations, or so-called ProdOps. We'll spend a few minutes on that. We'll also spend a few minutes on product experimentation, which by itself is not new, but there's a whole new wave of techniques and methodologies. And lastly, we'll talk about actionable customer insights as incredibly important, more important now than ever. In fact, this area has given rise to a whole number of new solutions and tools providers around understanding in-product customer journey. But again, those foundations we spoke about a few minutes ago, whole product, market fit, change management, those are evergreen, and don't ever lose sight of those while we get invested in the new stuff. So, if you are in a growth company, you can probably really relate with the stuff on this slide. If you're growing, if your product's successful, the good news is beyond your product market challenges, you get to solve a whole new set of problems. So if your team is struggling with anything on this page, I know companies I've worked with, including for the last few years, are going through their adolescence, and they are just getting sometimes overwhelmed with lots of things internally. And just to cherry pick a couple of these, we call it death by 10,000 paper cuts, because your product managers who are really ultimately knowledgeable about market and product and customer needs are very much in demand for sales calls and all kinds of other things. The other thing that happens as your product team grows is that a lot of product managers who are often confident in being articulate spokesmen of your product, they often improvise. They do things inconsistently across the group. And that may be good in the moment, but it's really hard to grow an organization and have consistency. Data, key performance indicators, those things start to spread and multiply geometrically and sometimes get out of control. and there's no shortage of tools. So just a couple of examples
Hold on,
around
David.
why there's actually...
Yeah, David, I just want to add that although you're talking about growth companies, also if your company is struggling or getting flat growth when you've had years of great growth, some of these things also happen. For example, the finance people come down hard and say, how come you're not meeting your KPIs, but the KPIs for your department are different from the KPIs on a different department? Yep. And so it ends up being a really tough thing to do. So these are not just scaling up issues, although they can make it a
Yep.
lot harder as you do scale up. Mm-hmm.
Great point, Pam. Thank you. And so out of this craziness, really there gave rise to this notion of ProdOps or product operations. So this is interesting. These are early days. And if you look at ProdOps, if you Google ProdOps now, or if you read this space, and I'll bet a lot of you do, you'll see there's lots of different interpretations and guidance as to what this could mean. One of the working definitions that I've worked with the last 3 years at a company here in Portland has been really operationalizing a lot of the things that product managers have to do consistently and have to do, every day. And this is using best practices for tools, getting real data-driven and metrics-driven. It's infrastructure and reporting that's scalable, repeatable, and predictable. So the rest of the company, and not just your customers, know what to expect from you. There's 3 outcomes.
Hold on.
First off, Pam, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I did. So when you have a product organization, do they all report into one person, or are they still part of their organization and you're pulling them in to work with you? Which one is it that
it's a good question, and like so many things in product, there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer, but the general notion is that companies are often, if they're experiencing the problems we spoke about on the prior page, they're wise to put together a ProdOps team, and it could be a small team. And you may draw people from across the company, which in fact is a great practice to help that team have experience and have relationships they can leverage. But generally, this is a team function. And in most cases, it actually reports into the product management leadership in the company.
You mean
again, your mileage may vary, but that's a common pattern.
You have control over?
Well, yes, for moments at a time, as the case may be, because craziness still abounds. But if you look at what ProdOps is doing, it's all the things around the perimeter here in the right. These can include functions like release management, so that all your products, not just your main product, get released through the same rigorous practices and cadence, publications. At the company I've worked with the last few years here in Portland, our UX team rolled up through ProdOps. This is where your executive staff goes for dashboards, not just how your product's doing in the field, but how the products that are not in the field yet, that are pre-release, coming along. How are we managing risk? And how are we managing projects for customer-facing things especially, like research, like early product market fit, like pre-release programs and early adopter programs. So if you do this well, you get some of these terrific outcomes on the left around having much more data-based and evidence-based decision-making, increased transparency, so you're not getting interrupted every minute with how's this product doing, is it on time, is it on budget, and again, you become a much more oiled machine. So that's really ProdOps in a nutshell. If you're at this point in your company's life cycle, I really recommend you tune in here and really start thinking about investing in this space for the next year or so. Pam, did you want to add anything?
No, I think this is just a great way for people to have a holistic view of what needs to get accomplished to be successful. And I'm very encouraged that people can deliver this organizationally as opposed to this cross-matrix stuff that seem to have divided responsibilities. It's now clear what needs to happen, and you can get the team together to do it.
Exactly. So that's ProdOps. The next trend with respect to product that's really important, like jobs to be done, is not necessarily new, but there's a whole new way of thinking about it. And this is the ever necessary, essential role of product experimentation. And this is not a new concept. In fact, for those of a certain vintage, well before the iPhone, there was the Palm Pilot. And if you know what this is, you're probably smiling to yourself. And this was done back in 1996, a good 10 years before the first iPhone or smartphone. And Jeff Hawkins at that time, the founder of Palm, actually made a block of wood in his garage, that thing depicted on the right here. And he walked around with this in his shirt pocket because what he was trying to do long before he built the product was determine would people use a product that could, for example, fit in your pocket? What could you do with that? Would people use it once? Would people use it over and over again? And this was essential to get these kinds of questions answered well before you built a prototype. If you compared pretotyping, by the way, that's not a typo. Some people sometimes think that's a typo when you look at it. Prototyping is all around, can I build it cost effectively? How can I optimize? Pretotyping is all about, should I build it? And it's much more effective early on when you're doing product market fit type of research.
David, with the pretotypes, rather than building out pretty much everything and showing all of it, you might build out a piece of it and say, what do you think about this? Right? And whether it's hardware or software, right, you can build up little pieces and keep getting input and avoid mistakes. Although it feels funny to the people who want to have everything defined up front, it gives you a good way to actually funnel down into a really good solution for people.
That's exactly right, Pam. And the other thing is, even if you're not doing software or devices like this, if you're doing more traditional, tangible goods, commercial equipment, industrial equipment, lab equipment, things which would have required in the past substantial expenses and approval for tooling, for capital expenditures, 3D printing has absolutely disrupted this whole space. And now you can really build non-working dummy prototypes, if you will, quickly. You can throw them away. You can iterate very quickly. So while experimentation is not new, 3D printing makes this just as effective for non-software, more tangible products than it has ever been before. Tools like Balsamiq allow product managers to go through not finished UI and for products that don't exist, but get early feedback from customers as to whether the presumed problem actually helps address their pain points. Pam, go ahead.
Talk about user testing as well, because I think, when you talked about the Palm example, you said, well, he held it for 4 weeks. Who does that for 4 weeks anymore? Really? We don't have that time. Right? We want to get more instantaneous feedback. So user testing, where you can kind of send them a prototype and have them actually have people try and use it and get that feedback, within a day or two, that's really powerful.
Yeah, it's really key. In fact, while we're not endorsing any specific third-party products here, usertesting.com is an example of a service that I've used for years, which allows you to put together cohorts that map to the target personas and the target user profiles that you're thinking about, who are not customers, who are people that it's often difficult for product managers to reach at scale. But here you go, through companies like usertesting.com, you can reach cohorts very quickly, very cost effectively. So if you're not doing this, you're really missing a huge opportunity to really validate some of your assumptions early on, while the cost of change is very inexpensive and you don't wind up building the wrong thing later.
Right, and I think
so that's just a quick view on experimentation.
Yeah, you and I were talking yesterday. There's that source down at the bottom, and there's kind of a cool little video of Alberto Savoia, and his take on using some of these techniques as well. So it's really worthwhile investigating some of these sources, these core sources for you.
No question. Yeah, if you're not doing this, you're missing a tremendous opportunity to really understand what problems you're solving. The next area, in terms of product trends, is this whole notion of actionable customer insights. But let me start off with maybe a provocative thought, which is that a lot of us, particularly those of us with really strong marketing teams, are used to very mature and sophisticated pipelines and conversion funnels for turning leads into prospects, into customers, into repeat customers. But often, when we turn over the keys, for example, in a B2B product, and our implementation team walks away and says the customer's on the air, we often have no clue what customers and their users are doing in our products until the famous termination notice comes in at want to renew. So it really is no different than really flying blind. So let's talk about how you might not have to fly blind. There's nominally 5 dimensions of user engagement, and these types of capabilities are manifested in several different products. And for example, if you use a product like Pendo, and there's several others, of course, there as well today besides Pendo, but these are 5 dimensions that you can gain in your product today. The first dimension is... I'm gonna pause you there, because Pendo is something that you actually build into your software,
And it then gives you analytics as to how people are actually using your software. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Right. And when I say
Right.
Pendo, I'm using it a little generically because there's probably half a dozen providers now that are providing the same value prop. But yes, this is a tool that in Pendo's case you would build in some JavaScript to your product. Different products may have different implementations. But these are the 5 dimensions. Breadth, basically defined quickly, is how many active users do we have? How many people who could be using our product, especially in B2B or enterprise software products where you're selling a product that may be available to hundreds or thousands of users? How many of them are actively using it? And how many within a customer? And how many across your customer base? This is really key because the whole point of this is not just helping your customers make sure that their internal deployments go a lot better, but how can you determine what success looks like? How are customers using a product better, which can help other customers like them through, for example, your customer success team, help all customers be like your prototypical most successful customers. So that's breadth. Depth is a problem that plagues a lot of software, not just consumer software, but B2B software, where products are sometimes needlessly complex. They're overbuilt with many more features. So if you think about the old 80-20 rule, 20% of your features may be more than enough, for 80% of the value from your product. So depth, how much of a product are they using? And in terms of the actionable part, how can you gamify things like onboarding, driving deeper engagement in your product so that customers get much more value from it? Frequency, pretty self-explanatory, but just to include the definition, this is how often are users logging in, and how often are which users logging in, and why? What are they doing most frequently? How can you study the path? Again, what I've seen in B2B and enterprise software over more than a decade is that often there's multiple ways to solve the same problem. And I have to tell you folks, that it makes it much tougher on your customers. So find out the paths that the most successful customers are using, reduce options, reduce confusion. Efficiency here.
Hold on, David. I'm just let me just point that out because it's interesting. You talk to some product managers, and we talk to a fair few, and I've heard people say, you know what, I'm going to start pulling features. So I think that's a question we ought to pull out another time, which is how many of you have reduced feature sets as opposed to increase the feature sets, which is what most of us do all the time, right? Got to figure out. That
is so important. Yeah. Less is more, and what we've learned in spades, particularly through user experience testing, and products like that we're talking about here, is we often need one good way to do something rather than 3 options of doing the same thing. And in fact, that's a good segue, Pam, into the next category of efficiency. So efficiency simply is how much effort is required to get the value from your product. And this not only has UX implications, those are clear, right? Make it simple, make features easily discoverable. But how can we put information in our product in that moment's customer of need before they get stuck, before they call support? And when we talk about outcomes in a moment, you'll see that this is very, very high ROI because every call that you preempt coming into your support team is hard dollars. So how do you make features really easily discoverable so customers don't get stuck? How many of your support teams are answering how-to questions? So again, very, very key to make it simple for your customers to complete their tasks.
Yeah, companies like Intuit on the tax side, they're really good at this. They figure out where people are pausing, and the next time they release the software, they've got something which says, to get to the next step, you need to do this. Right? So they're looking for those bottlenecks, but the tiniest of bottlenecks, not the big ones, the small ones, making sure people can get through.
Exactly right. In fact, these are all tied together because, as Pam just pointed out in the Intuit example, efficiency will drive product depth. And if people are using your product deeper and getting value, it's much more stickier. It's tougher for them to leave. And the last dimension of user engagement here, and really these actionable insights, is around really customer satisfaction. And this takes many forms. This is, NPS-related stuff, Net Promoter Score. But the key thing about doing this in product is that that's actually the best time to put a thermometer in your customer's mouth and test their satisfaction. Not a month or 2 months later when they get a random email from you, but in the moment, if you do this judiciously so it doesn't intervene and interfere with them, there's actually no better place to take your customer's temperature than in the moment when they're using your product. So in-product NPS, for example, tremendous.
I just had this image of you putting thermometers in a bunch of customers' mouths, and I just, okay, here we go.
All right.
That temperature. I like it.
what we found is that using those 5 dimensions of actionable insights, this practice can really print money, really in 2 dimensions. First, above the waterline, you can recover lost revenue in at least 3 dimensions. We've had customers call and say, hey, we're not using your product. Does this sound familiar, by the way, with respect to the gym membership that Pam mentioned at the top of the call? We're not using a product. We'd like to buy fewer licenses. We were then able to show them, oh, actually, you are using our product much more than you thought, because often, again, particularly for B2B enterprise software, the buyer personas who are negotiating with you are not necessarily using the product and vice versa. So showing customers that they're using the product more than they thought they were is key, and we were able to take possible churn calls and not only preempt churn from happening, but upsell customers into more licenses. So really fantastic, previously undiscovered free money that was lying on the table. We also found unbilled valuable features, for example, customers using analytics that a well-meaning support person may not have charged them for. Guess what? If they're using it, they're getting value, it's worth them paying for. So recovering lost revenue, opportunities really abound. And then kind of below the waterline, you can do things like if you're doing release notes and product documentation, you can start putting those inside your product so they're available to your customers in their moment of need, rather than having to go out to your support, your help portal, rather than calling your support line. You can get just-in-time information in your product. And again, as we mentioned earlier, you can really start to gamify onboarding and bring some of those, the so-called commercialization of the enterprise expectations that we have from carrying smartphones, bring that stuff into B2B environments as well, drive user advancement, not just getting stuck, but having them level up their use of your product. So
Right.
very, very key feature.
I think the other one about gamify, sometimes we feel like, oh, we're a very serious software company, we can't game things, but we can make things slightly more enjoyable. I've heard of software where you had the official one and you had the bunny that did the same task, the guy in the suit and the bunny, and guess what? Everybody did the bunny, nobody did the suit guy. So, so think about how you can make your stuff a little bit more fun, a little bit more engaging. And some of that means taking away some of the technical terms as well and making them much more relatable to the way that your customers talk and think.
For sure. Thanks. All right. So we're going to take a moment now. Pam's opening up a poll. And of the 3 product management trends we just went through, we'd love to take your temperature, if you'll pardon the expression, on which of these you think would be most relevant for your team now. And we're going to leave this poll open for about a minute or so.
So what do you think, David? Are we going to game the system and tell people what we think?
Well, Pam, as you see the numbers rolling in, I know everyone will be interested to call out how people are voting here.
Well, I can tell you right now, actionable customer insights is just winning the game, but product ops is coming up in a strong second here. My goodness, we are really getting over. Okay, I'm going to give it about 10 more seconds. Looks like it's stabilized here. Nope. 10 more seconds. They're still rolling around here. All right. I think I'm going to stop here and close this down. So what we are seeing is actionable customer insights was 56%, product operations was 31%, and product experimentation is 13%. So trying to figure out what your customers are doing is really important. That thermometer and temperature taking, definitely a very positive thing to do.
Great, great. Well, thanks, Pam, for reading that out, and thanks, everybody, for weighing in. All right, so now we're going to move from trends in product management to some innovation and tech trends. And we could spend hours or days talking about technology trends. So what we're going to do in the interest of time, since we don't have a lot of time together with you today, is to just cherry pick a couple that we think are really essential for product teams to really be focusing on today. And, we said 3, but there's so many, we're going to throw in 2 at no extra charge for you guys. So we're going to talk about being where your customers are, the notion of digital transformation for non-digital products, the notion of smart spaces, the ever popular and increasingly important issues around privacy and rights, and then autonomy. So let's roll forward a little bit. The first notion that's really important now, which is really ballooning, is this notion of being where your customers are, even when they're not using your product, is going out to meet them. So these so-called digital touchpoints are starting to explode. They have kind of 3 general tiers. The first is maybe providing access to something when you're not there. and this could be pretty much any app you have on your phone that may be reaching back to your home security system, or perhaps reaching into your car. If you can get better control and insight, so much the better. And really best case, nirvana is reaching a digital, complete seamless experience. Let me give you a couple of examples here. There's a laundry place down the street. I won't call them a laundromat because they are so much more than that. But here's a place where you can go and do your laundry, and when you have about 5 minutes left in your wash cycle or in your rinse cycle, you will actually get a text. So if you wanted to step out and go down the street for a cup of coffee or stretch your legs, that place, machines, will notify you so that you know it's time to go back. And this really solves a couple of problems. First off, how many of us have forgotten that we have laundry in the machine? So it's helpful for us to just get on with our life and get our laundry moved from the washer to the dryer and then get home. And from the business's point of view, how many of you have had to wait for a machine you couldn't use, which was done because the person had not removed their stuff? So these types of applications are really, really win-win. As you can see in the smartwatch example here, again, I'm not trying to sell you a Tesla, but it's kind of cool if your car is charging, that you know your charger is done so that you can go back and get your car away from the charger and make it available for the next person to use. So really, really seamless of bringing those capabilities to you wherever you are.
It seems like the IoT thing, which was here's some chips and stuff, is really starting to make its way into day-to-day products and linking these previously relatively stupid devices, washing machines among them, with your needs, right? And so you got to look for these because you didn't think they existed, really. Keep going, because I think there's another example we have that was very cool.
Yeah, there are some really great ones. Another great one is Spotify, and I'm an admitted Spotify user. One of the things, I like so many things about Spotify, but one of the things they do so well in this context is my music travels with me. So when I'm in the car, I'm listening to something, I come back into the house, that music I just pick up where I'm at, so there's no disruption, there's no going back and finding where I was. So they have really done an exceptional job of bringing their experience to you no matter where you are, no matter which device that you're using. So great, great example of that. The next area is this notion of digital transformation, and this is really key, and in a sense, this might be a much larger market opportunity for many of the folks on the phone today and many of the customers and clients that we speak with every day around taking products which have been around for years and which are very successful and bringing entirely new growth engines to them by offering digital capabilities for tangible products. And so really the questions here are, how can digital technologies help you reimagine your product today? You're going to really need to get inside your customers' heads very deeply. And where can you fix issues? Where can you improve things? Where can you delight customers? A couple of great examples is companies like DeWalt, who make power tools and circular saws. So, you know, today, what a lot of people do if they're out in their garage or at the construction site is they're going to use that saw until something breaks or until the blade has to be replaced, and they're going to know because it's going to start slowing down or not cutting well. And at a construction site, there could be power tools left all over the place, particularly in a large building. And so how do you even find the tools sometime when there's lots of tools around? So DeWalt has done some really terrific work here. They now make tools with tags that you can place in them so you can find your tool in a sea of power saws that might be at a site. And the next step, not hard to imagine at all, is having preemptive notification when that saw needs maintenance or when that saw blade needs to be replaced or driving consumables. So there are some really key ways here for you, almost no matter what product you're making, to monetize consumables, preempt downtime, do proactive maintenance, generally delight your customers, and probably find whole new sources of revenue.
I think the revenue one is really important. If you're going to be selling these ideas to an old-style company, this is an important way to talk to them about this digital transformation.
Could not agree more. Thanks. The next notion is really this evolution we've watched for several years now into a so-called smart space. You know, years ago, although it seems like yesterday, you know, we sat in front of PCs to do a lot of things for our professional and personal endeavors. A lot of those things went mobile, and then now they're in our pocket on our iPhone or Android phone. We now have, my home, for example, I think has close to 80 IP endpoints in the house. and I think of myself really not as a geek, but just as a measure of maturity. There's a lot of IoT things spread around now, and really smart spaces, in a sense, are kind of the endpoint here, the nexus of where all these things converge. A couple of interesting examples here. Some of them are, in fact, called out here. If you bought into the Nest ecosystem, they did a terrific job, both before Google acquired them and since, in for example, your thermostat knowing when you're home or not. And when you're not home, it will turn down the house into idle mode, saving you money, and basically providing a ton of value even when you're not there. And when you walk in the house, your Nest Cam, which is connected in the same ecosystem, now knows you're home, and it can take it out of eco mode. It can basically, they talk to each other, and they are aware of whether you're home or not. So really, really terrific.
And this is sort of,
Pam, you're about to say something.
The individual, but really I think huge savings can be made for buildings, right? You can control the entire building. So we're reaching audiences which may have a lot less experience in dealing with some of these technologies. And so you're going to have to build that into how you deal with them. The UX becomes incredibly important.
It really does. Some other quick examples here. Pampers, who many of us had our kids in when they were younger. Pampers is really innovating here tremendously. So the Lumi family today of products is really interesting. Early days, we'll see how it does over time, but Pampers worked with engineers and pediatricians to create a whole new kind of baby monitoring system that combines a camera and a sensor that can attach to your baby's diaper. So this is going to let parents, particularly new parents or anxious parents, understand how the baby's sleeping, how that compares to the amount and quality of sleep they should be getting at each stage of development. Other examples, here in Portland, by the way, at the Portland airport, we have a pretty cool garage for public parking, where as you turn down the row, you have a bunch of green and red lights. So without you circling endlessly, as we do in so many parking structures, someone with their naked eye can see a green light 50 cars away that's open. You can drive towards that. But connected parking, as built out by Bosch, takes it to another level. This can help your car navigate to the open spot in the garage. So really, really cool stuff. The GE Kitchen Hub, another great example of this. We've had tablets on refrigerators as experiments for years, but GE has taken it to a much greater, more innovative and value delivering level around having a tablet that will not only deliver entertainment there, but it enables video calling from the kitchen. In the kitchen, your hands are often full of food and meal preparation, so hands-free capabilities in the kitchen. There's a downward-looking camera there, so you can see what you're cooking, particularly if you want to capture that. So many foodies now, and you can get this on your range hood, on your microwave. So really trying to make these spaces come alive. So just some really great examples.
GE is really pushing the boat out. They are no longer your power company. They are somebody else, right? They are really pushing into this new space. And I'm thinking I should get one, because I talk to my daughter in the kitchen all the time. This would be awesome. So thank you.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. And by the way, for those of us in tech, we've had gadgets, no lack of gadgets and connected devices in the kitchens for years, but this is subtly very different than that and much better than that, because these devices are really aware of the kinds of things that you're doing and the kinds of needs that you have and the kinds of decisions that you want to make when you're in that space. So as product managers and as product leaders, really, there's a couple of considerations here. How can your product, no matter what you do, become more aware and deliver more value based on the environment it's being used in? How does your product get better when it comes from being in the street, for example, or out in public, into a smart space? And, from a technology point of view, we're going to have to understand, what kind of processing we need at the endpoint, what type of back-end cloud processing we might need, so you have a balanced experience. You can do it cost effectively, you can do it at scale. So this smart space thing, I think, just portends a lot of opportunity for all of us. All right. The next area is probably not new in itself, but has really morphed over the last couple of years, and that's really around privacy and digital rights, particularly as technology and as people's behaviors start permeating everywhere we go 24/7. So trust becomes more essential than it's ever been. New laws, a great example is CCPA, or the California Consumer Privacy Act, which took effect just a couple of weeks ago, really, really important. This really comes home to roost. And, as goes California, at least here in the States, you can expect this to propagate across the country very quickly. But CCPA, in a sense, is the American version of things like GDPR, or the General Data Privacy regulations that have been enforced in the European Union for years. So lots of interesting, increasingly important things that we need to really understand and take advantage of, not only so they won't hurt us or hurt our customers, but there's opportunities here to add in tremendous value.
And I can tell you right now, if you aren't following the California regulations, they'll come after you. And so even if you're in the strangest part, you might want to just plan on it, because it's just going to be a lot easier to build it in today than to try and catch up later.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. I'll give you a real example of the implications for this. So with a large B2B enterprise software company I worked with, we had, like so many B2B enterprise software companies, we built and architected that product over years to save everything, because here in the States, we were always concerned with supporting customers' requirements to archive things and audit things. And what if we needed to go back and see what Pamela or David did 5 years ago? So the idea was save everything and archive everything. And that is antithetical to a lot of this type of new expectation, not just in Europe, but here in California and everywhere else in the States over time. Is now the default for some regimes is don't save anything and make it really easy for customers to be forgotten, for example. So this put us at a crossroads. We had to take a product and re-architect it, so that if you were in the States, for example, we defaulted to saving everything for audit. If you were in Europe, for example, we defaulted to right to be forgotten, and for customers easily getting their information, and personally identifiable information especially, redacted or deleted from the system. So really, really big implications.
Okay, I think we got one more thing, and then we're going to do another poll, and I'm anxious to get to the poll, so go for it, David.
Yeah, terrific. The last technology trend, which is accelerating quicker than I think any of us ever expected, kind of an outgrowth of the machine learning and AI we spoke about earlier, is this notion of autonomy. And again, just a quick example for any of you Tesla drivers out there, they have blown the doors off of making machine learning really valuable in a practical sense. So for those of you driving a Model 3, for example, I'm not trying to sell you one, but if you're driving a Model 3 today, you know that you've been using enhanced autopilot for some time, particularly on the freeway. They're introducing full self-driving. It's monitored, but full self-driving later this year. And this car just, it doesn't take control away from you. It makes your driving experience, in a sense, a lot safer, because the car is going to see things that you can't see, and you're going to be able to really make sure that you're focusing on where you're going and not having to have eyes behind your head with everything. So super value. I can't wait till full self-driving rolls out. Yes, there will be problems. There's problems with all these technologies when they roll out. But I'll tell you one thing, if this is the worst it's ever going to be, it's already pretty amazing. And I can't even imagine how much better it's going to be in the next 10 years or so.
And I think it's not Amazon, just Tesla. I think it's going to be a lot of other companies. They're all moving to this. They're all moving to electric. They're all moving to autonomous driving. Everybody knows it's happening. Mm-hmm. It's just what's going to be the standard when we get there, right?
Yep, no question. And not only is that true, but if you look at the EV space alone, just for a moment, powertrain and battery technology, all those things are competitive advantage. But many analysts think that companies like Tesla's real competitive advantage is the 3-year leap they have in AI and machine learning and autonomous driving, because that's incredible intellectual property. So if you're in the EV space, it's a tremendous competitive advantage. But if you are in the robotic space, if you are in the delivery space, Amazon has poured a lot of investment into delivery, particularly last mile delivery. I don't know whether anybody on this call has had a drone delivered Amazon product yet, but if you haven't, you soon will. And yeah, there'll be problems, there'll be challenges, there'll be scaling challenges for all of these. But you need to be focused on this now as a real growth engine and an increasingly pervasive customer expectation. So those were some key technology trends that we cherry-picked out of several. let's stop again, and Pam's going to open the poll. And of these, we'd love to understand which of these are on your radar screen.
But in this one, the nice thing about this poll is I felt like we could be interested in multiple ones of these, and so you have the option of selecting which one you think is going to make most sense for you. Right now we have, okay, we're going all over the place here again. A lot of digital transformation, a lot of being where the customers are. All right. It's like watching, David, it's like watching one of those things where, you know, what is the change over the years in terms of where people are?
Yeah, it's generational in a sense, but it's increasingly it's increasingly accelerating.
Yeah. All right, I'll give it another 5 seconds. Looks like it's pretty much stabilizing here. Oh, still answers coming in. All right, so right now the big winners are be where your customers are and digital transformation. Those are sort of neck and neck. Okay, I'm going to close it and then I'll read it. Looks like we got there. Okay, so 55% are be where your customers are, 56 digital transformation, smart spaces 18%, which is respectable, 27% on consumer privacy and digital rights, and 16% of autonomous things. So really a little bit all over the place, but really good to hear that the people are focused on the digital transformation and where their customers are. I think that's a winning strategy.
I agree. Okay. Thanks for readout, Pam, and thanks everybody for weighing in. All right, so we've just gone through a lot of stuff. Let me, if I may, take a moment to maybe tee up a couple of so whats. So for product management trends, we spoke about the emergence and the explosion, in a sense, of product or product operations, new wrinkles on product experimentation, and how to really understand and then have actionable insights around those understandings for your in-product user journey. On the technology side, we spoke about several upcoming and rapidly advancing trends around being where your customer are, digital transformation, smart spaces, privacy, and autonomy that Pam mentioned. So really my questions for you are, what are the biggest needs out of the product management capabilities and tech trends that ought to be on your roadmap? At least, if not your productization roadmap, at least your research and investigation roadmap for this year. And how could one or more of these allow our company to differentiate our products in a way that will delight our customers and, you know, provide new growth engines? So that, at the end of the day, those are the essential so what questions out of this.
Yeah.
So we hope that's food for thought.
What you're going to do with this information. Yeah.
Exactly. So at this point, we are going to, before we open it up for Q&A, Pam is going to open our final poll for this morning and get your general sense on how this webinar was for you. So Pam, take it away.
Okay, great. Okay, so the poll should be up. So generally doing pretty well here in terms of being helpful or somewhat helpful. So folks, can you do me a favor right now? If you want to start putting up your questions, that would be really, really helpful. Just slide them into the chat box once you're done with the poll, and that would get us kicked off here. I'll give this one 10 more seconds. Seems to be stabilizing here. All right, geez, it's still going on. Okay, let me close that one down because I want to give people enough time for questions here. Thank you very much. That really helps inform us as to what we're going to do in the future. David, do you want to pop on your webcam? I'm going to do mine, and we're going to.
Okey-dokes.
Right, and let's see. Just checking on the questions here. So
looks like we have a couple already.
Yeah, we do. So that's really good. All right, hang on. So I think the first question we have here is, hold on a second. It's supposed to bring it up. Okay, so we can show all the webcams. There we go. All right. First one is, what are the key tools? You mentioned a few. What are your favorites? What do you think? I mean, you mentioned a couple, but are there others that we didn't talk about?
Did the questioner ask tools for which of these categories, or just the product tools in general?
I think it's more the pretotyping and prototyping ones.
Yeah, some of the ones we mentioned and some of the ones that I have a lot of hands-on experience with, again, we're usertesting.com. If you are doing any kind of enterprise app, consumerized app, particularly mobile apps, and if you want to get a really quick, low-cost cohort together, because that can be so time-consuming for us as product managers or product leaders to go recruit these teams, and they do just a terrific job of just delivering that as a service for you. So usertesting.com, I can't say enough good things about. Balsamiq also, and our intention with product managers is not necessarily to make every product manager a UX expert or a UX designer, but the power of a tool like Balsamiq, for example, is that it is so obviously not a finished UI that when your customers or your prospects or your research participants are looking at it, there's no expectation that that's the product. But it's a super fast way for a product manager to test a hypothesis about what is the job to be done, what information am I starting with, what decisions am I making, and what's going to come out of that. It's very, very effective for wireframing. You can drag UIs together in about 5 minutes, and then when you ultimately turn on your UX team to doing actual design later, they have a tremendous head start because you've validated, you know, what a mock-up, roughed product interface might look like. So again, Balsamiq is just one example. There are several of them out there. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, and so another question was, how long does it take to start implementing some of these things in your product? So you say you want to get some information, some metrics that is built into your product. How much overhead does that have on your product development?
Well, I can share again. I'll try to make a more generic, scalable answer from a specific product I use. I'll go back to Pendo that I mentioned a little earlier. So using a product like Pendo to help us understand those 5 dimensions of user engagement was the development part of it was very simple. In this case, there's a JavaScript snippet that your development team has to drop in, which takes about 10 minutes for a developer to do it. There are some technical, sometimes constraints depending on how your product's architected. For example, if you're using a single page application, if you're using iframes with different content framed in, Pendo and some other tools may not necessarily know where on the page your customer is clicking. But if your product is fairly modern, not using a lot of iframes and third-party places framed in, you can do the development part of that immediately. You'll probably have to open some firewall holes, so that your product can talk to the Pendo service. And again, if you're using a different company other than Pendo, it's going to have to talk to some cloud service somewhere. So the dev part's easy. You'll have to test, make sure that dropping in the third-party JavaScript doesn't break your app. So that's a pretty quick short putt. Opening up the firewall holes here and there, and then teaching. I think the biggest part is teaching your product managers of what information is important, because when you first start using any of these products, you are overwhelmed with things you could potentially know about your product, and not all of that's important. So you want to really understand what are the 1 or 2 or maybe 3 things, and only 3 things that I care about, so you don't get overwhelmed by the tool.
Okay.
And that might take a quarter. That might take 90 days. And you're going to probably want to assign somebody, maybe crowdsource it if you can on your product team or on your product team to really be your Pendo or Amplitude or Heap, which one of these products you're using, to really be a sponsor for it. But it's not hard. It's not hard at all, and the benefits are quickly realized.
Okay, good. And do you end up having your management start asking you questions about these as well? Do they start coming up and saying, what's the latest dashboard?
Yes, they do, and that's how you know you won. That's a great day for a product manager when your CEO or your CTO says, David, how's our product doing? And you can say, hey, here's novice users, here's more advanced users, here's how many people are logging in this week. You can give that information to if you have a CSM team, a customer success management team, they have now a whole new enriched dialogue with those customers, which can help them understand how to get more value out of your product. So what a great answer to the question, how is your product doing? So yes,
okay,
Pam.
I have one last question for you, and then we're going to wrap it up here. So I know that you are really excited about Tesla introducing that self-driving mechanism, and that's fine. Is there anything else that's your top of the pops that you're going to go and buy next year that's super exciting to you, or that you're going to be looking into personally? We all have our
Oh gosh,
snacks, right?
I don't know. Christmas is behind us. I'm trying not to buy too many gadgets this early in the year. No, I'm kind of I'm kind of full right now with other connected devices. As I mentioned, I have about 80ish devices just in my home network, and every one of them is a potential infosec exposure. So I'm good. I'm good right now. But I get tremendous value from the devices I have in my house today.
All right. For me, I think I'm going to try and, I'm living in a house which is basically from the 1970s. It just has two prongs outside of the kitchen and for the electric. Yeah. And so I'm hoping to eventually move to a place where I could do Nest so that I can actually be more comfortable at home. That's my 2020 goal. So there you go.
I bought into that ecosystem about a decade ago when it was new, and I've never looked back. So awesome. Good for you.
All right. Okay, great. Do you want to move on to the next one? And I think I've got something to pop into the window here. Hold on one second. And let's see if this is. So I just want to invite you to the next webinar in the series. That's Diagnosing Product Management. How do you get to peak performance? And Roger Snyder will be talking about this. He has worked with many companies through 280 Group, but also before joining 280 Group. And so he knows what it takes to get people to really hit their max. Because it's not just that people are working long hours, but they're working on the right things. So go ahead and register now. And so I put that into the chat box for you. I'm going to also suggest you do it for another reason. We have some webinars that we have had over the last year, and they are on this website. And when you go and register, you'll see the list of potential webinars you could go and look into from the library. These aren't the AIPMM ones. These are the ones we directly with our customers. So by all means, please have a look, register for that, and look out for other things that you could take on board. I'm going to give you 3 minutes back on your hour, and you can get on to your next meeting or whatever else is on your long to-do list. And hopefully we provided you an amazing new thought process for 2020. Thanks so much,
everybody for joining us. Here's to a successful year to everybody. Go get it.
Yeah. Now I got to figure out how to end a webinar. Here we go.